one talks about what they've done. I mean, essentially what they've done is innovation, isn't it? But let's talk a little bit about innovation and the anatomy of innovation. And speaking of anatomy of innovation, coming up, we're going to have a gentleman who's written a book. He's a NED professor at the University of Johannesburg Business School. He sits on the board of some of the most amazing telco companies, one in particular, Telkom. And he's also the CEO of Future Advisory. Herman Singh, good morning.
Good morning, Kieno. Good to be here. Thank you. And
hello
to your audience.
I know you don't want me to call you this, right? But I mean, let's check out the protocol side of it. Shall I call you Prof?
Listen, it's better than calling me Mr. Singh. That was my dad's name.
Okay, I'll stick to Prof then. Now, Stefan Ekberg. I mean, he's that Swedish dude in a tie. I don't know if have you ever seen him.
Never seen him in a tie. I'm blown away.
I'm like, what happened? Anyway, he might or might not have said this to me the other day. He said, talking about innovation is like talking about sex. He said, it's better to just do it. So I said, okay, great. But Herman and myself have to talk about the anatomy of innovation so that other people can do it. And that's exactly what we're going to do today, Herman. So wonderful having you here. So you've done a whole lot of stuff. I normally ask people to tell their personal stories first, and I think it's always great to get the contextual, the background. It gives us those little nuances that we need to understand more about what's coming up. So tell us about Herman Singh. I mean, were you always this intelligent? Were you always this popular? Did everybody always listen to you?
No, I've always been the outsider. Look, I mean, I grew up in apartheid South Africa. I got shot by the South African police force while I was fighting apartheid. And I spent 20 years of my life basically building the industrial backbone of Africa. And my last job in engineering was really the managing director of Siemens for 15 African countries. And then I spent the next 20 years building the commercial backbone, internet banking, telecommunications. So I've got this weird, fourth industrial revolution experience where I've done industrial and commercial systems for decades. And then I was involved in listing companies on the New York Stock Exchange and building the first unicorn in Africa. And I've built a number of billion-dollar businesses in my career. So it's great to be here with you. Thank you.
So do I feel slightly intimidated now? Although I did research that actually, so I know that about you. This is why I've been following you very closely on LinkedIn as well. You also authored a book, did pretty well on Amazon. I mean, we can talk about that when we've got some time. It's called Devolution, an essential guide to winning in a digitally transformed post-pandemic world. I'll try and figure out what that actually means. No, I'm just kidding, Herman. But let's talk about the state of innovation as it currently exists. And let's focus on this continent, Africa. This, of course, is WiT Africa. What is if you look at it, you've obviously done a lot of work here. How would you sum up the way innovation is lived on the continent?
I love the fact that it's so organic, unlike other countries. It's very organic. It's grassroots. It's very pervasive. It's very dynamic. Lots of stuff happening. And the beauty about Africa, we've had 1,000, 10,000, 50,000 years of innovating with constraints. This is very different to the rest of the world. In a weird way, lean startup should actually have evolved in Africa because it's the way we've always innovated. We've never had resources. We've never had skills. We've never had infrastructure. And we've always had to innovate with nothing. And so, people were running around in Africa using and recycling scrap and garbage and making amazing things. And if you think about it, that's really what lean startups about. So we've always been good at that. And whenever things didn't work, we pivoted quickly. And so for me, Africa, lives lean startup and other people talk about it. And it's very dynamic space right now.
The one thing that irritates me, and I mean, we both work at business schools, but the one thing that irritates me when these bloody academics come and try and put structure to what innovation actually is, and then they complicate it and throw in a couple of businessy type words, and then everybody thinks you need a degree to be a blinking innovator. It's ridiculous. So I want to start at grassroots, right? Surely that is where we need to begin, at school. I mean, a system that hasn't been changed for the last 150 years, where we tell kids failure is a bad thing. Don't fail. Don't try that. If you try that, you're going to hurt yourself. I'm going, rubbish, man. So what's your take on how we should be inculcating on not entrepreneurship, innovation in the minds of young people? Because that is where the fertile ground is.
So I think there's 4 steps on that journey. The first step is to say, where do we know that what is required for success and the technology that we're going to use is known and certain? Wherever that's clear, you must use best practice. In other words, go and look at what everyone's doing and teach people that. And that's what textbooks are written on. The second thing that you've got to do is say, now where there's less certainty about what's needed by customers and business, and where the technology that you're going to use is less certain, well, you can't use best practice because there is no best practice. It doesn't exist. Well, now you're going to use good practice. Washing your hands, wearing a mask. We didn't know, right? There's no best practice. That's good practice. We're figuring it out as we go. Then certainty gets even lower, right? And with innovation, certainty decreases. And so now you're not sure what customers want, and you're not sure what technology you're going to use. Well, now you've got to use what I call emergent practice. You've got to get to the very edge of your industry, and you've got to observe research, and you've got to live the lives of consumers and see what's emerging there and try to copy that. Finally, you get to what's happening in Africa, where the needs are completely unknown, the technology infrastructure is completely unknown, and I refer to this as novel practice. In other words, you are going to be the first person to build this. You better know how to build it, and you better take the risks, because guess what? There's no textbook because you are writing the textbook. And so Africa, for me, is very ripe for what I call novel practice and emergent practice. What doesn't apply in Africa is good practice and best practice. And so you're not going to find the textbooks. The reason I'm in big demand around the world is a lot of what I do, textbooks haven't been written yet. Because best practice and good practice for digital transformation don't exist.
But this is what COVID-19 has brought about, hasn't it? I mean, it's been the great leveler, as I said earlier. Before, everything was predictable. Linear strategy was amazing. We could plan 5 years ahead and go, wow, man, we need to do A, B, C, D, and E. Nowadays, we're going, hold on, maybe we should start at Y, then go to B, and maybe include C, and then maybe we'll get the outcome that we're looking for.
Yeah, this reminds me a lot of the change of South Africa under apartheid. Under apartheid, we had a certain set of big monsters, typically, white Afrikaans companies ruling the country. Then the rules changed, right? Sanctions got lifted. We had a black president. Well, and when the rules change, everybody goes back to zero. So, and the apartheid, those companies that profited in the past don't profit in the future. Well, COVID's done the same thing to the entire world. And so the sound bite here is, when the rules change, everybody goes back to zero. And boy, did the rules change under COVID.
And they certainly have. And, as the rules change, your environment changes, so the tools change. I personally am a massive fan of using things like, there's obviously the futurism side of things, understanding the dynamics that affect your environment, right? But I've become a big fan of the process of, not necessarily the technicality thereof, design thinking. Because what I like about that from an innovation perspective is that it gives me that empathetic insight that I need. It also allows me to work with a group of people, right, to find a particular solution. And I'm sure you've read Professor Saraswati, who's written on effectuation and effectual thinking. And that is maybe where we're going to move, where we decide that, hey, this is my strength. This is what I know, right? These are my skills. This is my acceptable loss. But now, who the hell do I know? Who else do I know to help me actually navigate this very uncertain future that we have? Some would argue that is almost the future of strategy when it comes to innovation. What would you say to that?
Yeah, look, the big challenge that you have today is people think they know what customers want. And I can guarantee you, they don't. This is why I love design thinking. I'll give you an example. We launched, I think, the 3rd internet bank in the world in 1999. The 3rd internet bank in the world at Standard Bank. And I had a board of directors, most of whom were over 70 years old, telling me, well, firstly, I remember saying to them, we're going to build this thing on the internet, banking on the internet. And they said to me, at the time, Jacob Marie's PA used to print out all his email for him, right? And so these people then questioned me and said, what are you building? I said, you're actually not my target market. And I realized I was talking to people who were very old, very successful, very rich, and very wrong. And the challenge that you have is this is what you have to deal with in the world today, right? People who are very senior. I call this the hippo problem. The hippo problem is the highest income person's opinion. And the reason that design thinking is so powerful is design thinking helps you overcome the hippo problem, because it uses what's called data-driven decision-making, which says, no, your opinion is interesting, but irrelevant. I actually want to hear from the people. And that's what design thinking does.
And it also democratizes innovation within organizations because, the CEO all of a sudden doesn't make that decision. I mean, having said that, I mean, the one person who's overcome a hippo problem is someone, Neil Schroeder, right? ShopRite. And we're talking innovation, and ShopRite, yeah, I think they still have some stuff to do with travel. But he went in and said, I need a 5 billion Rand margin squeeze. Thank you very much. I mean, also to a whole bunch of hippos, right? But thanks to COVID, they relented. And that 5 billion margin squeeze went into adding value upfront to the customer. Frictionless. And look at where they are today. What do you think about the ShopRite example?
I think it's a great example, right? The highest margin component of ShopRite checkers is a small counter in front of the tills called the money market counter. They make far more money per square meter in that little space, because in that space, now remember, they're a store selling groceries, right? In that space, you can, for 10 years, 15 years, you've been able to deposit money, withdraw money, collect a social grant, buy a bus ticket, buy a plane ticket, buy a movie ticket, buy a sports ticket, buy funeral cover, buy airtime, buy prepaid electricity. I can carry on. Basically, it's Amazon. Amazon's been running inside ShopRite checkers for 15 years. I don't think ShopRite checkers gets enough credit for what they've built. It's been astonishing. In fact, the money market counter at ShopRite checkers is, for me, the analog version of what's called a super app today. Well, ShopRite's had that for 15 years.
Herman, how do we get people to change their bloody ways, Herman? I mean, the hippo problem is all over the place, right? Companies are very slow to adopt. I mean, we see it now, even with COVID, they get kicking and screaming, and then they're still yearning back to the good old days before COVID-19. So this hippo problem's not going to go away. How do we collectively, collaboratively deal with that?
The best metaphor I can use is work from home, right? Work from home has been possible for 20 years. 20 years ago, we had BlackBerry, and maybe not 20 years ago, maybe 15 years. 15 years ago, we had BlackBerry, and 15 years, we had Outlook web access. The combination of those two things allowed us to work from home. Nobody freaking worked from home for 20 years. Then suddenly, COVID came. So in other words, work from home's always been possible, and it's been important, but it's never been urgent. And because it's never been urgent, people never changed. COVID arrived, and suddenly half the people in the world were working from home. So if you want people to change, it must be possible, it must be compelling, it must be important, but most importantly, it must be urgent. And if you don't make it urgent, it's never going to happen. So urgency is it. Yeah.
And you also have to be it also has to be comfortable. Hold on. As per that ad. Right? As per the ad, it also has to be comfortable. And yeah, everybody thought I had a proper jean pant on. Absolutely not, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. Well, Herman, I'm gonna. I just think, and I want to go back to a question that I put to you earlier, and I don't think you answered it, by the way. It's the question of our youth. And I mean, we all know. And when I say youth, I'm talking about anybody at school. School, I'll say it, kills creativity, does a whole lot of stuff. How do we rescue them from that? Okay. How do we get them to be more innovative?
Yeah, I think the problem we have is we're training people for jobs that no longer exist. And really, we must stop thinking jobs. We must start thinking businesses. In India, there are many universities now where you don't submit, when you do a master's, you don't submit a thesis. You have to go away and build a company. And I believe that going forward, every school child should be given a task to build a business. I don't care if it's selling apples or selling sweets or making samosas. Whatever you want to do, go and do it. But every child should be given a small amount of seed capital, and their final exam is show me the business that you built, and go figure it out, and go learn how to pivot, and go ask your friends and build a network. That's the skill we're going to need in the future, not this business of when did Jan van Riebeeck arrive in the Cape and was it racist?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's an irrelevant conversation. Go build a business, because you're not going to get a job. You're going to build a business.
That's exactly it. I even asked the question, why are businesses even asking you to have a high school senior certificate? Before you come and work there, right? I mean, I would rather, when I used to work at a tech firm and then I decided herding engineers is not a very good idea. We asked the question, should someone actually need a high school senior certificate before they come and work here? You know what, if that person spent time on Udemy or Coursera or any one of the other awesome platforms that we've got on the continent, upskills themselves, builds shit, right? And then delivers it. Who needs the bloody matric? Whoever needs the degree, you can get that later, because the future of education from an innovation perspective is also called into question. Why are we front loading everybody with all the knowledge and then we drop them into work? We should actually be giving them a little bit of something up front, dropping them into the workplace, and then doing continual education to help the innovation process.
Exactly right. We spend a lot of time teaching people what to do and teaching people what to know. We don't teach people how to be. And I think in the future, we must stop teaching people what to do and what to know, but what to be. And you have to be an entrepreneur, because in the future, it's how you think that's going to make a difference, right? You could go out onto YouTube, learn how to make videos, build your own channel, and become freaking famous. And that might be a far more better and sustainable as a career than learning facts. And up to now, schools are based on teaching you facts, which is what you do, which is what you know. We don't even teach them what to do, right? We don't even have vocational training, really. That's
Exactly. Now, Herman, I just want to thank you very much for your time. I mean, if I could swear, I'd say you're fucking marvelous, right? So always enjoy your insights, and can't wait to touch base with you again. Of course, Innovation City partnering with WiT Africa, so can't wait to include you into those discussions as well. But that's what it is, ladies and gentlemen. Flipping marvelous. I'm going to ask Stefan Egberg. Am I going against protocol here? Anyway, Stefan, switch your. Now, can we please see your legs? What are you wearing?
I'm actually wearing real pants.
Oh, are you serious? Oh, come on, man. Okay, we're going to work on him a little bit. But
I'm also wearing sneakers. So.
Now we're talking. The one thing Stefan and myself have in common is we both love
sneakers.
Yeah, there's one brand in particular. But anyway, it's been an absolute pleasure.
New Balance.
Thanks, folks.
New Balance indeed. Professor Singh, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
That's great.